Hour continues on News Talk 1440 WROK.
Hey, we are back on the State Line Sports Hour. These guys know my favorite movie is Hoosiers, is it not?
It is.
Me and Gordy Casper talk about it every game. Mike Winters loves it. And today we have another special guest from Hoosiers. We have Brad Long, who played Buddy on the movie Hoosiers. And Brad, great to have you on today.
Hey, guys, thanks for having me. It's a pleasure.
How you doing anyway? Do you get busy with doing stuff for Hoosiers, or does it just pop up once in a while like this?
Well, you know, it's interesting. I mean, it seems like they do increments of 5 years. They usually do little kind of mini reunions. And this last summer basically was the 25th year anniversary, so we had quite a busy schedule last year. But, you know, every now and then it pops up, and, of course, ESPN keeps raising the bar with ranking the movies. So it's flattering. It's humbling.
As I say, we kind of talked earlier about how the movie's almost taken on a life of its own. You know, it's about a true story, but it almost seems like the movie itself it's like it happened, you know, as opposed to the true story. Does that kind of amaze you sometimes?
It is. It's, you know, sort of like art imitates life, and I think, you know, the part of the charm of it is that it is based on a true story. I know a lot of times when you watch movies, it'll have little snippets at the beginning or the end, say, you know, inspired by true events or based on a true story, but you guys are right. This event actually happened, and all these years later, they still talk about little Milan beating up on Muncie Central that year. And this is just a takeoff on that. And, you know, the guys that got it right were the writer and director. They did a good job with it.
And, you know, you're kind of the conspiracy part of the show. You know, in the show, you get kicked off the team, and miraculously you show up and you're playing in a game, and they cut that scene out. Luckily, I bought the deleted scene, so I've seen that thing. I love it. You did a great job acting. Were you shocked when you saw the movie and they cut that part out, Brad?
Well, I was, but I kind of had a heads up on that. The director took me aside, and he was really upset about it because he felt like it really channeled that gap between how Buddy gets kicked off and gets back on the team. But, you know, it sounds like sour grapes on my part. I mean, there was a lot of great scenes that were cut. That just happened to be one of them. But it was, you know, it was just so fun to be able to play a character. You mentioned getting kicked off the team. I get teased about that by my college and high school teammates. You know, they say, you know, man, Long, we don't remember you ever talking back to the coach. And I said, you know, that's the fun of it. You kind of get to play another character. And, you know, I redeemed myself, though, there in the end. The movie's about redemption. I make up for it and end up being the captain. So I saw the error of my ways.
Well, you know, when I watched those deleted scenes, that was an important one. I was glad to see that. It answered a lot of questions. But there's a young lady that's in there. I think she's Sheb Wooley's daughter in the movie. She got cut out of the whole movie, and she's on all the deleted scenes in that part of Hoosiers.
She did. I still tease her about that. Her name's Laura Robling, a real fine young lady, a great actress. You know, I thought she did a great job in the movie, and you're exactly right. I mean, I had no right to complain because other folks had even more scenes than I did cut out, and she was a big part of that movie. There was a couple other scenes where I walk her to class carrying her books, and I give her a little kiss before we get on the team bus. That was kind of the other romance in the movie. Yeah. So, but all that got cut out because, in their view, the editors felt like it didn't particularly advance the story. So, you know, they had, for time reasons, and television, you have to keep it under 2 hours for commercial time, and that was the reasoning. But yes, the director was upset about that. He felt like that scene was important to explain how Buddy gets back on the team. So you weren't alone. A lot of the media thought the same thing.
We're talking with Brad Long, who played Buddy in the movie Hoosiers.
How much fun was it for you you're just a young guy and you're getting to hang out on the set with guys like Gene Hackman, Dennis Hopper, Barbara Hershey? Just how much fun was that for you?
It was fantastic. I was a kid in a candy shop. I've made the comment many times that had the movie been about ping pong or soccer, I would have been out of my element. But because I had played high school basketball and college basketball, I was comfortable. To me, it seemed like a big press conference. You know, we would have those in college, kind of a media day where the media would come out and you'd kind of go through drills and answer questions. And to me, it was an extension of that. So it wasn't like real foreign territory for me. But, you know, I didn't realize at the time that all these years later the impact that it would make. So, you know, again, it was just a pleasure and an honor to be associated with that. I've made the comment before that, you know, I had no acting experience. I mean, I played Jacob Marley and Scrooge in the 5th grade. So that was the extent of my acting ability. So they took a chance with us. You know, they really took nobodies, if you will, from Indiana and said, hey, you know, instead of making a sports movie and getting actors and hope they can play basketball, let's get basketball players and hope they can act.
And now you're doing inspirational speaking. You know, how do you get into something like that? You know, and do you draw from the story in the movie and things like that when you're doing your speaking?
Well, it's interesting you say that. I actually do draw from the story because it's based on second chances, and I don't make any bones about my faith. I'm a Christian. I do a lot of speaking to youth groups and civic organizations and so forth, and I tie that in with the same theme of second chances. And I think in life we get second chances. So it's just God gave me an opportunity to use that through some speaking engagements, and I really enjoyed that.
A lot of people said you probably should have been Strap in the movie when I read about your speaking, but I think that Strap kind of gets left out in the fact that he did the Tebow before Tebow did. In the movie where he's always kneeling down, and you call it the Strap.
I can't believe you said that. That's exactly right. He kneels down, and actually, I think Tebow owes him some royalties.
Yes, I think so, and he would probably take that. Well, what's the one thing? What's the one thing, Brad, you're going to remember from that movie? If somebody asks you what was the thing that stuck out, what was the thing that you'll always remember? And I know there's a lot of things, but what was the thing that was very outstanding to you?
Well, gosh, that's a great question. There were so many things. I think the thing that when I really think about the movie and reflect on it, it's amazing that a little movie like that, they had hoped at the time that that it would be interesting to people in Indiana. Maybe some folks would go see it. And what happened out of that, guys, is it went global. I mean, I have had people come up to me and say, "Hey, Brad, I didn't know you spoke Spanish." And I said, "Well, I don't. I never took it in high school." And they said, "Well, you do now because we saw your movie on a plane and you were dubbed in Spanish." So it's one of those things you would expect it maybe with a title, Hoosiers, to do well in Indiana, but in fact it did well worldwide. And I guess it's just surprising to me. And I think what happens out of that is people tend to enjoy movies where the underdog makes good. It makes you feel good about yourself. Whenever people overachieve or overcome obstacles, people think that whatever their situation is, hey, I've got a chance. I've got a chance to do something here. And so I think that theme will always be around, and Hoosiers just happen to be a true story on top of it.
What was your favorite scene in the movie?
My favorite scene probably is the hospital scene where Everett goes back to see see Shooter, who's drying out in the hospital. And that was an emotional scene, and just the impact of it. Of course, it's about basketball, but that scene kind of encapsulates the whole theme of the movie, and that is second chances. And the idea of how important basketball was to the small communities. There he is in a serious situation, drying out from being an alcoholic, and all they talked about was basketball, and, saying, I wish I could be there. And I wasn't there when they shot that day, but when the crew came back from that, they were just, you could tell they thought, man, that was a heavy scene. And they were right. I think that's the one that gets me the most.
We're talking with Brad Long, who played Buddy in Hoosiers. And, when you look back on that, what is your favorite gum? Do you have a...
Dentine.
There we go.
You got it.
Did you get to pick that out, or was that written into it, Brad?
That was written into it, and I'll tell you a funny story about that, guys. You talk about how the Lord works in mysterious ways. I'm a gum chewer. I've always chewed gum my whole life. It's probably a bad habit. I probably overchew it. And I think they noticed that when we were, casting and trying out. And I have to ask Angelo all these years later if he wrote that particular part that I was a gum chewer. But the Dentine line was so perfect for me because I was a gum chewer. And Gene Hackman told me after the movie that his single favorite line in the whole movie was Dentine.
Yeah.
And so that will always be special to me. And what makes that scene work, and you guys know, it had nothing to do with me and my acting abilities. It was Gene's reaction to a kid filing out and looking and totally serious, saying, Coach, I listened to you, and it was Dentine. And I get more comments about that line. And Gene's reaction, like, wow, I can't believe the kid took me that serious. Has this little smirk. That's what makes that scene work, is Gene.
We love it. Matter of fact, one of our guys that works with us, Gordy Casper, says, ask him about the Dentine. So that's why I did that stuff. Hey,
yes.
real quickly, kind of a sad part of the story was one of your the actors in the show, the guy that played Merle, is gone now. And that had to really affect you, especially with your second chances stuff that you're doing right now.
Guys, that was one of the hardest things I've ever been through in my life. It still gets me to this day. Kent Poole, a friend of mine, I roomed with him, and, the thing I can tell you about that, and I don't think his widow will mind. She just told me he just had gone into kind of a dark place. He was having trouble with his business, and there were some problems, in the marriage, and they were working that out. And Kent was a guy that was like King Midas. I mean, everything he touched turned to gold, and really didn't have a lot of adversity in his life. And to some degree, that may have been part of the problem. When things were going a little bit south, it was like, strength through adversity, and he had not had that much adversity. And she told me, she said it just was really hard on him. And, we all players, wish we could go back in time and have had a conversation or pull him aside and been some type of support. But, I just feel like in my heart that when somebody does something like that, they're not their self. They don't really know what they're doing, so I cling to that. And but I miss him terribly.
Well, thanks so much, Brad, for being on. We really appreciate it. We love the movie Hoosiers. Buddy was one of my favorite characters, and maybe we'll call you up during basketball season. Would that be okay sometime?
Guys, I'd be thrilled if you did that.
Thanks so much, and have a great day.
Thanks for having me, guys.
Bye-bye. Talking with Brad Long, who played Buddy. Good interview.
It was a good interview.
Good insights. Okay, we're going to take a quick time out. We'll be back with a final wrap-up here on the State Line Sports Hour on News Talk 1440 WROK.